Not online. Check online.
I don't see anybody on.
Nobody.
Nobody online from the committee from CEAC.
Hey, Ms. Esmeralda, if you would, was the meeting declared legal by way of posting?
Yes, sir, it was.
Anyway, move to open the meeting. Carl, it's all yours.
Great, I've got a mic already, and my mics work today. Thanks for coming, everyone. Good evening. I've got a report, several things to report on today, quite a bit, so I'm probably going to move fairly quickly. I'm going to report on the 2020 forensic audit. I'm going to report on our tactical plan, highlights from our tactical plan, and combine that section with the 2022 general election review. And then I'm going to talk about election complaints, then talk about our 2023 election plan. And I guess we'll get some general public comments, and that'll be it for the night. So within my presentation, I've got places to stop, and so you can ask questions in between sections. But feel free, if you feel compelled to, feel free to jump in when you like asking questions. So, CEAC members, this is just to remind everyone that I believe everyone's membership has expired, and that you guys are all holdover members now, and the Commissioners Board is prepping to take action on the next appointment for the next 2-year period. And I'm not sure when that will take place. I think it's going to be within the next month or so. It's through December. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So you will become holdover. So now, first, I want to go ahead and move to the forensic audit review. So, as you all know, that Secretary of State conducted a forensic audit of the 2020 election in 4 counties. Tarrant County and Collin County, which represents the largest Republican counties, and then Harris and Dallas County, which represent the largest Democratic controlled counties. They came out with a 359-page report that is available online. And related to machines and software, security, voter registration, training, voting in person, voting provisionally, voting by mail, chain of custody, voting equipment, post-election processes, records management, and complaints. And I will say, I just want to make a comment about it. Working with Pat Ellis and his team was, and we were worried that it was going to be a very painful process, but it wasn't. The Secretary of State's office approached us in a very professional manner. We had a very good working relationship, so it wasn't that bad. I know some of my colleagues are a little nervous about audits in the future. I don't think it's anything to be scared of, frankly. Of course, for us, it was a little difficult because it was the 2020 election that they were auditing, and a lot of the leadership from Dallas County elections is no longer here. So there were some question marks, and so we had to do a little digging to find out how things actually took place in 2020. So it was a little rougher here than the other counties to find some of that information. So as far as the findings for Dallas County, there was some positive comments, best practices mentioned by the Secretary of State's office. And there was over 40 issues reported. And so I'm just going to talk about 15 of those issues tonight. The more concerning and major ones. So one was a failure to include one vote center in its final tabulation, resulting in 156 ballots not being counted. There were 318 provisional ballots that were discovered in February 2021 after the election was certified. 63 of those ballots would have counted had they been processed. Of the provisional ballots that were processed, 895 were accepted, but only 813 were counted, resulting in a discrepancy of 82 ballots. As far as the vote history records, there were 21 voters who had received credit for voting by mail. Yet those voters were found, those ballots were found unopened in carrier envelopes, so those ballots did not count. There were many discrepancies in the number of voters checked into the poll book versus the number of ballots counted. For 6, the records showed 76,991 ballots transferred from the early voting ballot board to central count. But 78,147 ballots were tabulated in central count. So there was quite a paper discrepancy between those two. CEAC provided 4 sources of data showing mail ballot statistics. The sources were inconsistent and none matched the canvas records. The county's records showed major discrepancy in tracking mail ballots requested, returned, and ultimately counted. There were difficulties in processing the high volume of ballots by mail due to staff turnover that occurred just prior to the election. The e-poll books created what were termed, dubbed phantom voters, where a voter checked in and the poll book checked in a different voter. So a voter checked in, and then but when they checked in, it didn't register that person's name. It registered to vote for someone else. That affected 188 confirmed voters, but there was an undetermined number of voters that it may have affected due to, we don't know because of big records. There were 994 mail voters who were miscoded, resulting in some persons under age 65 incorrectly receiving a mail ballot. There was no emergency response or contingency plans to notify the Secretary of State in the event of an emergency. Poll workers failed to consistently fill out the available chain of custody forms, resulting in gaps in record keeping. Records showed that equipment was delivered to wrong locations, and DCED was unable to locate multiple boxes of records listed on the inventory sheet. So that's the top 15. There, like I said, there was around 40 or so. Many were much less severe than those that were just mentioned.
How do we avoid this in the future? We just learn and change our practices, or
So that's a great question, and I'm going to address that shortly. Okay.
not do it?
As far as on the positive side, there were some best practices identified by the Secretary of State. We said that we segregated our ballot by mail that were mailed in bulk, making it easier to identify potential seed, the potential seeding phase of the ballot harvesting. We kept a daily report form during early voting for the early voting ballot, monitor daily reconciliation. So ballot board basically monitors on a daily basis when there's discrepancies, so they don't have to wait till the end to find those discrepancies. Our practice of printing daily poll book tapes showing the names of voters combined with their handwritten check-in log made the phantom voter issue easier to track. And DCD maintained an electronic record that linked polling location electronic media with the tabulation auto log entries. So I think I wanted to get some feedback on those initial findings, but to answer your question first, I'm going to talk next about our tactical plan. And our tactical plan is those things that we've identified that make us less bulletproof as an organization. And it's where we've identified multiple ways to improve the organization. And what we're doing now with this forensic audit is we've taken those 40-something odd items, matched those against our plan, our tactical plan, to see if we've already addressed those issues. I can tell you that most of them have already been addressed. we're going to identify if we haven't addressed something.
And these things that you just went through were from 2020.
2020, correct?
Much of your management team has changed during that period also.
That's correct. The entire.
Michael, question, on number 6, where you have the record showing about 77,000, were they in a particular area, particular ballots? Were they a particular, district where you saw it weighted of that step? Do you have a breakdown of what that looks like?
Of course, this is Secretary of State's audit, and it's a 359-page report. So we're going through that, and when we, like just today, we were on the phone with them, trying to get an explanation, further explanation on some of it, because not everything was included in the report.
Mhm.
My gut feeling on that one is not so much a ballot. There's magic ballots that popped up, but that was a paperwork discrepancy. The bookkeeping, what we found is the bookkeeping in 2020 could have been much better. So that's, we identified that some time ago, and I think in the summer of, well, probably early 2022, we fixed most of it. As far as the way we manage the movement of ballots between our mail ballot team into the early voting ballot board, and then from early voting ballot board into Sutton County. So they basically go, they're in our possession, they go out of our possession. The early voting ballot board is an outside entity, then back into our possession. So our chain of custody between those three partners has now been approved.
How often is this audit done?
So,
Yearly?
so the Secretary of State, legislature authorized funding for a new division in the Secretary of State's office. So there's a separation. There's Secretary of State's office that runs, helps runs elections, and then there's an audit division. And that audit division has been authorized to audit 4 counties every single election. So we were the first ones, and then they do a drawing for subsequent ones. So I can't remember who the 4 counties are that were for this November 22 election, but Harris County was one of them, so they were a repeat customer. And then there was 3 new counties.
That's for every general election or every election period?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll know when her name gets pulled out of the hat. I'm going to guess it's for every uniform election date. So they're most likely going to be for the main elections. Because I think they got a whole division. They got 8 full-time staff members working on that.
The one that the line items were ballot were not counted. Were they able to tie them to specific pieces to see if it would have made any difference or not, if they hadn't?
No, I don't believe that they did not do that.
They were basically quarantined where they stood.
They would have had to basically count those ballots, tally them, and then compare that to the actual returns.
Right.
But we're well past the point of contest, so it would have been a futile exercise. Question?
Since this is kind of a new committee, is there a rubric or template moving forward that we can know what the definition of success is when we get audited again? So everybody knows what the rules are and what we know, what to look for based on this last deal, makes sense.
I think that the audit division is actually working on something like that. Because what they want to do, they don't want to just surprise people. They have a very positive attitude towards this, where they want to make elections better. And so I think that, it's a new department, and I think that they are working with the Texas Association of Election Officials to develop something along those lines.
And we will have that, we can expect that sooner than,
I don't know.
until that time, we don't know what
Well,
good is.
what we've done internally, keep in mind this audit shows, results. And so what I'm going to kind of talk about next is, with this tactical plan is, in fact, why don't I just go ahead, I just want to kind of talk about this very briefly. the tactical plan is, when I came in here, when I was hired, the reason I was hired, one of the reasons I was hired was to do a major overhaul of how we do business. And I talk about it all the time. I say infrastructure. I say, think about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines, oh, everything's great. No, they're wonderful. Yet their infrastructure was rotting away. And it's not until something bad happens that you recognize that. So this 2020, we're now seeing something bad happen. But when I came in here, I recognized that something bad could happen. And so that's why we started getting into the tactical plan. So
But you said the audit showed results, not process.
Right, that's correct. And so, you know, the tactical plan is this is all the things that we've looked at and identified to say, here's some things we think need to be fixed. Because we want to prevent bad results. To a certain extent, results may only show the tip of the iceberg, because there's a lot of other bad things that could happen that maybe didn't. Through the sheer hard work of people in this in 2020 who were here, who worked their tails off. And so, you know, sometimes problems are avoided, but then sometimes some problems can't be avoided. So I'll go ahead and pause. I'm going to keep going, but I want to see if there's any other questions regarding the audit. All right, so I'll continue. So the next section, I'm going to talk about 20.
Michael, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi. Were there any errors so egregious that it would have changed election results?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I don't believe there was any, you know, we didn't look at that. The Secretary of State didn't look at that. Since I've been here, I haven't been looking at 2020. I've been looking forward, you know, how to prevent problems, not, you know, to cast blame on past problems. And so I don't think that that's, my sense is that was not the case, but I don't say that.
Actually, I have one more question. The number of findings, is that typical for this type of audit? Is this higher than usual? Is, you know, what was discovered here?
I think the Secretary of State's office, in their preliminary, in their audit report, they said something along the lines of, this is the first time this has ever been done. That they believe that this is the most thorough audit that you'll see. So typically you don't have the Secretary of State's office doing audits. This is kind of a new thing. We saw something in Arizona where some outside agency did, you know, audit. I think that Texas is probably taking a better approach where it's more of a collaborative effort between Secretary of State's office and the counties where they're working in fashion. And so I think it's kind of unprecedented. So I couldn't tell you whether or not those results are, you know, terrible or not. In my experience, I can tell you that, you know, if you look at Florida 2020 or 2000, Denver, Colorado, where I went in 2007, and in 2006, you probably would have had those same results. And that's why they fired everybody in 2006 and had to do fix things. Over and over again, you can see a lot of elections offices that had old processes that need to be revised. So I don't think that this is completely, you know, unsurprising. I don't think that Dallas was any worse than a lot of jurisdictions. I think that all jurisdictions need to continually work to update their processes. Just my opinion. And I think election officials are diligently doing that. Okay, so in early 2022, we had some challenges. I'm going to just briefly talk about those and where we're at with those challenges. I'm going to talk about our tactical plan summary, and then look at this handout. Then we're going to go into a team-by-team review. When I say team-by-team, our departments within my department of our highlighted 2022 tactical plan changes, and then the results of that in the 2022 election. And then what we're planning on for 2023 for those tactical plans and election changes. And then final summary, what's pending, I guess, is a final summary of our Ask Ed help desk tickets. So basically what we do is every time we get a phone call, no matter what, we're very, very thorough about this now. When we get on election day, we have 30 people on the phone bank over here in the next room. We have a whole operations center in this area where we're logging complaints, we're logging issues, we're logging comments, whatever it may be. And so what we're really doing now is beating the heck out of those help desk tickets and looking to see, what the problems were or what the potential problems could be or what we can do better to improve our training, et cetera, et cetera. So we're getting close, we're getting this final summary of the analysis of those tickets. And then, like I mentioned before, we're reviewing and analyzing the forensic audit results, making sure that, and then those all go into this plan and we prioritize what we need to do in the future. Because you can't fix everything at once, you have to prioritize, here's where your needs are. And I can tell you right off the bat, you'll see from that forensic audit, you heard mail ballot. There was a ton of problems with mail ballots. Well, we recognize that right off the bat. One of the first things we did is we rebuilt the mail ballot department. We went from a paper-driven process to an electronic-driven process. And so that's been, revised completely. We've still got some more things to do there, but we're most of the way there with mail ballot. So that was one of the highest priorities. But there's still, I would say this is about a 4-year bill. We're not even halfway through our 4-year bill in rebuilding. So, having said that, in early 2022, there was a lot of things that made 2022 a challenge, including the primary, including 2 May elections. So we had delayed state, county, and local redistricting. And so that, that the census was delayed, the legislature was delayed, the commissioner's court was delayed, and thus we're at the end of the, after all that with redistricting, we have to re-precinct. And so that was quite a challenge to do in a very, very short period of time. So that's completed. Accelerated redrawing of the precinct lines and city sub-precincts. So after the big lines are drawn, then the cities submit their lines, and then we have to redraw these sub-precincts. So we basically have to do the same thing twice. We draw election precincts, and we do sub-precincts, and it's 2 major projects. We did those both last year. Now we just completed a 3rd phase of that just today, because there's the city of Dallas did submit their lines to us until December. So most submitted last January, and then now another round was done just this last December, and we just completed that today. So round 3. So that's why I say mostly completed. And as of today, I could probably say completed. We had a new Vietnamese language requirement where we had to translate all of our materials, and so that was completed early last year, or it's been ongoing this year. Delayed completion of the election training warehouse facility was supposed to be done on January 4th, wasn't done until around September. So that really hurt us through the primary elections and May elections because we weren't able to charge our wings and get a lot of work done. We have going into the November election, we had a lot more room to work. Late arriving SOS guidance to implement SB1. I think I've mentioned this before, where SB1, when you write a law, that's just the first start, and then there's interpretations of that law by the Secretary of State. So they put out these election advisories, et cetera. I believe there was 46 different communications in the last 80 days prior to the election. The last one arriving the day before the election. So every time one of those advisories comes through, you have to reassess your whole operation to make sure you're in compliance. So that was difficult in 2022, but it's completed now. New records management tasks, we've been inundated with lawsuits as well as public information requests. And then, of course, the forensic audit. Forensic audit is complete. The lawsuits are ongoing, but the workload has been reduced lately. And the PIA requests are just problematic. I mean, we're just buried with them. And we, as well as every other county in the country. In March and May, we had 3 back-to-back countywide elections, which was quite a challenge. Temp labor and poll worker shortages last year, if you remember, in March and in May was very difficult for a lot of reasons. And so we resolved most of those issues. We didn't have those issues in November. COVID-19 concerns was still pretty big back in March, but those have mostly been resolved, I think, because people are more comfortable with COVID now. Cybersecurity threats, that's ongoing but mitigated. I think I'll mention later on, we went through a DHS audit where the feds come in and they audit you and you look for vulnerabilities. It's like major effort. Misinformation and disinformation, that's very common in elections these days, where there's people accidentally or on purpose trying to put out false information to try to disrupt things. That's ongoing but mitigated. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then, of course, the political climate and controversy these days in elections is very difficult. That's ongoing, but we think we've got some of that, most of that. So I mentioned tactical plan. So what is that? It's a multi-year business process re-engineering that results in sweeping change, innovation, and modernization related to our facilities, our equipment, our technology hardware, our software applications, our processes and procedures, and our organizational design, our org chart, how we're organized. So what you have here is a summary of the projects you kind of read through to get some idea of what we do, okay, what we've looked at, what we've completed. And so completed projects, I think there's 91 in there. In progress projects, I think there's 27. And kind of ongoing that will never end, there are like 20 of them. And then pending projects, it lists 4, but it's actually, I got an asterisk, it's a much larger number because that's what we're analyzing now. We're adding to the pile of work. And so some of that is dependent upon advice from you, from advice from outside agencies, with the from audits, from a whole variety of what needs to be done and what's the priority. So now I want to kind of go. I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions. Okay. I'll move on. So I'm going to go team by team and kind of talk about what we did in 2022, what we plan on doing in 2023. So in 2022, the executive team, developed and documented the tactical plan, implemented hundreds of modifications to processes and procedures. In 2023, we're going to, kind of already mentioned this, analyze the 2022 outcomes and feedback from CEAC and other sources. We're going to monitor legislation to see what changes might, the legislature might thrust upon us. We're going to look at forensic audit, include new projects if necessary. We're going to update our technical plan and tie those to our county objectives and key results. And then we're going to revise this document as necessary. So it's never ending project. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. In our executive team, we also made analytics improvements. So 2022, or we started this in 2021, but in 2022 we made a lot of progress where we use analytics to project, monitor, and modify, what equipment and people we put in both centers. And then so we do these very sophisticated projections. And then we monitor, then we put a big pad in place in case we miss. And then we monitor by the hour during early voting and on election day to see if there's trends, to see, if we're wrong somewhere, and then we react. Oh, we thought that we would, need so many machines at this location. Oh, we see that it's trending high, we better send another machine out, that sort of thing. So this was a collaborative effort with political parties, activists, CEAC, and government agencies. And we want to involve you guys more in those decisions in the future. So we first thing we do is we project, on a county-wide basis, and I think we projected 391. No, this was actual turnout for the election was 391,000 early voting, 213,000 on election day, and 656 provisionals. The numbers were under our projections countywide. I think we projected, when we talked to the parties and everyone else, we said, we looked at historic patterns in 2014, 2018, 2022. We said, does this feel more like 2014 or 2018? 2018 was 54% turnout. 2014 was about 34% turnout, I think it was. And everyone said, this feels like 2008. That we think it's going to be higher than 2018. And so we were slightly above that 54%, we projected 56%, but for actual was only 44%. So we take that, and that's okay, because when our projections, it's not about so much being accurate, it's making sure that we don't run out. So we're always shooting high rather than low, because we want to make sure that we don't have people waiting in lines, waiting for, if there's not enough equipment or people. So in 2023, we're going to refine our projection models based on the changing voter behavior. So I'll give you an example when I talk about changing voter behavior. I'll talk later about commercials we do and trying to get people to go to places where so they don't have to wait in line. Well, when we do that, we're influencing behavior. And so we might be breaking some of the models. And so every time there's an election, you get a little bit more data. And so if you think about this, vote centers in Dallas County are fairly new. So we don't have a long track record to base our projections on. And so every election we'll get better and better data, and we'll get better and better results as far as our projections. And I can also tell you that those projections fill you in. So I think I might have talked about this before. We do that not only countywide, but vote center by vote center, hour by hour. So we're constantly monitoring those, and it's pretty interesting. And we more recently included SMU and showed them, the mathematicians at SMU, and showed them what we did to say, we're kind of amateurs at this. What do you guys think? So they gave us a pretty good thumbs up on that, and we're pretty happy with that. But we're going to work with them in the future to see if they've got any advice on how we can improve our projections. As far as our executive team, personnel improvements, in 2022 we had, we had a whole bunch of new employees early in 2022 that gained experience through the year, and so they're getting to be seasoned election officials now. Less COVID and weather-related loss of labor hours. Early in March, we just got hammered with ice storms. I think it was like 11,000 hours of lost hours that we lost because of COVID, ice storms, everything else. So that's hard to recover from. We didn't have those issues in the 2022 general election. We have a lot more documented tasks and defining procedures. So just to differentiate, this is our tactical plan. This is projects. This is rebuilding systems, rebuilding procedures, processes, etc. E-date, documented tasks in E-date. E-date is something that we've built that says it's taken the institutional knowledge out of people's heads and said, how do you run an election? And at E-date is a kind of a term that's E-minus date. 40 days before the election, this is E-minus 40. 30 days, E-minus 30. So E-date is also an acronym for election deadline and assignment and tasking. So in our E-date list, it's by division, by department, by person, by days, by function, by date. And so that's sortable, filterable, where person can come into work and they look at their list and they know what they've got to do today. So that's building, more and more every day. And that makes us resilient because of employee turnover. That institutional knowledge doesn't leave with the person. So it's critical. We've collaborated with temp agencies and political activist groups to recruit better quality temporary workers. And I can tell you that Bonnie back there, sitting there, the Democrats, Republicans both did a fantastic job this year of recruiting. We had a surplus of poll workers that we didn't even need them. We had like 300 plus people that we didn't even need to use. So for 2023 plans, we're going to continue development of our e-date and team procedures. We've got a new HR and records team to improve our HR management. That's an area where I talked about our OKRs, our objectives and key results. That's big with the county where we have to really do a much better job with managing our HR piece. We kind of put that on the side for the first year and a half because we're too busy running elections, but that's a big growth area for us. Election day management improvements in 2022. We changed our operations center. If you would have walked in here in this day, this whole room, these 3 rooms were all big operations center. We had expanded phone banks. We made sure all of our calls were logged into the AskGuest system. We had, in addition to those phone banks, there's 3 phone banks. There's a judge hotline, voter hotline, and a VIP hotline. In addition to that, we had 7 response teams. You get a phone call, the judge hotline enters a ticket, the response team monitors those tickets, prioritizes, and responds to the most important tickets first. So there was a response team for personnel, procedures, facilities, hardware, logistics, voters, and VIP. Then in the field, we had our county inspectors, our hardware technicians, our sheriff's deputies, our SWAT teams. So they're directed and deployed by these response teams. So then we had a new safety plan. With the school, there was a lot of concerns from schools this year about safety after Aldi. And so we worked with the FBI, the sheriff, local law enforcement, and multiple county offices, and we came up with a safety plan. And we prepared for the worst case scenarios regarding poll watchers and other problems. In early voting, we had limited number of serious issues involving law enforcement during the last 3 days of early voting. And we were really, it was building up during early voting. We're getting concerned that election day might be messy. But as it turned out, election day, the issues were far lower than expected. It was very quiet. I think what you're seeing, and we had virtually no law enforcement involved in our election. We had 24 sheriff's deputies out in the field ready to respond with our technicians, as well as 7 CID officers ready to respond. Sheriff was great in helping us, but we did need you. And so what I think what's happening is, there was a lot of potential drama between poll watchers and poll workers, and that didn't happen. So I think people are realizing everyone's just there to do their job. So I'm very grateful for that.
I think it's going to be a lingering effect from Uvalde. There was a lot of, I'll call it overreaction by parents, thinking that their exposure was greater. Actually, exposure was less because the bad guys don't want to deal with people. So
I don't know. I can tell you that there's bills in the legislature to limit the use of schools on election day, which would be disastrous.
they're required to host elections if they're in.
That's correct. Now, I think the better route, in my opinion, is to just close the schools for the day, have an in-service day.
Richardson.
And some of our jurisdictions do that. And I'm really grateful for them.
But private and parochial schools you know, don't fall under the same umbrella though. What, do we have any idea what our percentage of private parochial school wise is or?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sure Melissa knows that in fact. How many private schools do we have?
I don't know, but I would say less than 25, less than that.
It's around 300 total schools. 300 of our 469.
They can make an instantaneous response. They aren't not going to host an election and they're not bound by anything else other
The
than.
public schools have to. But
Private schools have to, yeah.
So for 2023, I mentioned before the analysis for help desk tickets and then corresponding refinements, our training, our procedures, it's not just looking for bad behavior, but it's like, hey, maybe this board didn't understand the training, you got to modify the training. And that sort of, maybe the procedure needs to be simplified. And of course, enhancements to our safety planning, that we put that safety plan together very quickly. So we will continue to refine that, and we may even do some desktop exercises. We've been part of those, so it's pretty interesting. We simulate that. The county has done that for some of the cybersecurity, so we may use that as a county for elections. Human resource improvements. The HR and record scheme is brand new. We just hired a new HR manager just this last week. And he will be starting this week, and we're going to be hiring a records coordinator. I think it's a 4-person team. So they're going to develop this comprehensive HR management program, including, I mentioned this, our HR policies and procedures, helping our employees, assess our employees, and evaluate what they need to become better employees, give them better training. So the county's making a big push with LinkedIn Learning and getting people educated. You can't just magically become a sophisticated employee with software. You got to give them that training. So in 2023, we also are looking to purchase and implement an electronic records management system. That is critical because right now all these PIA requests are all done manually, and we have to touch paper over and over again. It's just not efficient. So we're looking to streamline that entire process to try to, and most importantly, to push as much of this information out onto the website for free. When we get a PIA request, they go to the website, it's free, go get it. And so that's a big, big project. And then, of course, expansion of the state plan. Payroll improvements. We made a lot of improvements this last year. Our payroll was completely, literally done by hand, where people were pulling out paper timesheets with calculators, keying stuff in. And so we first improved our inventory of our payroll sheets, and then we put data entry into timesheets rather than calculators to our worker management system. We changed from manual data calculations to formula-driven spreadsheets. We collaborated with the auditor's office and IT to develop these automatic imports because we had paper timesheets that go into our voter management or worker management system, and then another manual process to get them into Oracle. So it's a double manual process. So we worked with the auditor's office to automatically import that stuff from system 2 to 3. And we collaborated with the treasurer's office and constables to pay our 3,840 workers for this last election.
We had a total daily time capped at 15 hours, which that was shorting some people, but now you're compensating for setup time on the front end.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned that later, but so we're now paying for training. We're now paying for setup the night before. So those are 2 more elements to make it that.
Is that additional time or that's a fixed amount for the setup?
It's by the hour, but I think if you have 5 employees, 5 coworkers, if you're allocated 5 coworkers, you're allocated 5 hours for that. tonight.
Yeah, 'cause
So it's-
we were, at 15 hours, we were blowing the cap in some locations,
Yeah.
depending on how you were staffed, so.
For 2023, we're going to work with, we're in the middle of this right now. We're working with the auditor's office to implement a new electronic time clock solution. We just got the auditor's approval for this a week or so ago, where we had worked with, for the last year and a half, with our vendor of our electronic poll books to put a timekeeping system on it. And so they did that, they delivered that to us. Now the auditor's office has approved it. We are now testing that. So instead of paper timesheets, it'll be electronic timesheets. Timesheets will move into an electronic poll worker management system. We will approve that time, make sure that's accurate, and then it will electronically be imported into the Oracle payroll system. Or we're even talking with a vendor about someone other than the auditor and the treasurer's office to have them do that payroll, manage direct deposits and issue those checks. And the reason for that is the auditor's office is really busy. There's this major conversion of the Oracle system. And whenever we have payroll, we have nearly over 4,000 paychecks. And that's competing with the county's 5,000 paychecks. And so we want to eliminate that competition. So if we can bring that to an outside vendor, that's one of the things we're looking at also.
Are we looking at the pickup and delivery compensation law? Because there's been some grumbling at the $25, which hasn't changed for a long time.
We haven't really looked at that. I know that the payroll, the poll workers' salaries have gone up significantly. It went from $11 an hour to $16 and $18, now $16 and $20. We haven't really looked at that. That we're constantly, that's something, that's what you guys are here for. So to give us that
I'd
feedback.
recommend looking at that because I do hear grumbling about that's been out there for decades at the same amount. We've adjusted other areas, but not that. So.
Good point. I'm sure we're writing it down in the back. As far as communications teams, in 2022, we had a lot of activity. A lot of our communications teams back. We got Nick, Laura, and Esmeralda. Jayla's our new member. So we had a lot of, I don't have the pictures in this report, but we had new internal and external signage, the vote center signage on the outside, and new internal signage, you guys have seen the posters, we talked about all that. But then the early voting sites, I don't know how many of you voted early, but we have I can tell you this, I get to listen to the story. When I came home in the primary election, the next day, after working for 24 hours, I see a ballot sitting on my kitchen counter. I'm like, I said to my wife, what's that ballot? She said, well, that's my receipt. I said, no, that's not your receipt, that's your ballot. And when she was at an early voting site, she got it out of the voting machine and she looked around and no one told her to put it in the tabulator. She walked out with it. Well, so that's one of the reasons, like at your early voting sites, we now have those big 3 signs. Number 1, check in here. Number 2, vote here. Number 3, deposit the ballot here. So that type of signage to help prevent those kinds of problems.
We looked at the large informational signs, which don't want to stay up on the walls because they're so big and they retain the memory from being rolled up.
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard that one. I don't know, Melissa, take a note on that. Some of the feedback.
If you're trying to attach those large signs to like brick, they don't want to stay up. So
yeah, I know that we've done tape, we've done the sticky stuff, and I think they're constantly looking for better solutions.
Institutions don't like the sticky stuff. The fact that to the extent there's residue.
Yeah.
So I thought if we can divide those in half, so they don't have the rolled memory. It'd be easier to attach to services.
Or we store them in some different ways.
Or stored flat would help maybe.
Yeah.
So.
Good feedback. So communications team, that new internal and external signage, increased outreach. Esmeralda and her team, for our voluntary deputy registrars. Last year, they conducted 36 VDR trainings, trained over 3,000 VDRs. Those VDRs submitted over 14,000 voter registration applications, and 1,400 of them were during this on one day during our voter registration drive-through event that was here at our new facility. So it was great. Website improvements. I don't know if you paid attention or you guys are on our website, but we've made a lot of modifications to the look and feel of that. The addition of Vietnamese translated web pages. We didn't just say, oh, just use Google Translate. We translated the whole web page. Google Translate's okay, but it's not as thorough as doing a full translation.
Do we know, do we have an idea where we're probably increasing on Chinese and Harris County has to?
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on those because every 5, now it used to be every 10 years, now it's every 5 years with the numbers come out, the survey. So we can 4 more years, we could get another language. We're going to be looking at that. I don't know if you guys saw this, but we have a new rumor control page. I talked about misinformation and disinformation. The way to fight that is to put out the truth. So we have a rumor control page. Whenever we hear something kind of crazy, we say, no, that's not actually accurate. Here's the truth.
That's on your Dallas County votes.
Yeah, it's right on the front page. Yeah. And so that it says 13,000 page views since its creation on October 24th. That's actually not accurate. That's between October 24th and I think the first week of December. So I don't know. Probably not a lot of traffic since then, but it's picking up and it's pretty popular. People were actually reading. So we're grateful to see that. 20 website usage was up significantly this year. So during the voter registration period, it was up 236% compared to 2018. It was up 258% during the early voting period. And it was up significantly. I think the report from our vendor said like 2,000%. I don't know if I believe that. But it was up significantly. So we're getting verification on how much it was actually increased.
Central Appraisal District was hacked. Are we pretty comfortable with our security on our?
That was all, well, I actually, we had, where I mentioned that the DHS came in and audited. I believe that was part of the audit. They're looking for those vulnerabilities. And the county's IT department is pretty good about that. They've really buckled down on security. Then of course our voter awareness campaign. There was a big push. This year, I think we spent $183,000 in April, talking about vote, where to vote, looking up, and then another $605,000 this year. I'm going to ask Nick to talk about that real quick, and I'm going to take a break so I can take a little drink. Nick, you want to come up? Nick is our communications manager. He's going to talk just a little bit about our awareness campaign, and I'm going to ask, have you guys all seen our commercial? Has anyone not seen it? I probably won't show it. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm pretty sure I met everybody. I'm Nick, I'm the communication manager, and so speaking about so we were hearing from, this body and a lot of other people that Dallas County voters still weren't 100% used to the vote center module. And so we wanted to do an awareness campaign, not just on that. So it started from before voter registration ended. So we had digital ads and digital ads on social media and Google ad placements, kind of letting everyone know the deadline for voter registration. It was all 3 languages, the Spanish, Vietnamese, and English. And then after voter registration, we picked up with mail ballot application stuff. So deadlines, how to, where to go, stuff like that. We saw a lot of really good click-through rates online. I wish I had the numbers for you, but I can get those. After that mail ballot application deadline, it then went into early vote, and so that was probably the biggest spin. And that was commercials, and we had to do commercials in all 3 languages. So it was digital ads, commercials. We had mail. We had what else? Mail, digital ads, commercials, radio. I think we had several billboards, at least one in each commissioner's district on high traffic intersections. Just letting everyone know you can vote anywhere in Dallas, voting, I forget the overall name of the campaign, the internal name of it, but it was vote anywhere. And so that was pretty much that aspect. And those commercials started 2 days before early vote started. So we went through and it was, I want to say ABC and NBC, those are the two biggest watched local news. Univision, Via TV, which is the cable network, but it's the most watched Vietnamese local station. They also have a Vietnamese radio station. We use that as well. So we were on most radio channels and most of our news channels as well. So those ads were running early morning news stations and, evening traffic hour were the radio ones. So I think ABI did a really good, they did a really good ad buy to get our kind of the bang for the buck.
Is there advertising on dark?
No, I think they've done that before several years ago, but I don't think we did that this time. But, so it was actually a really good spin. We saw a lot of traffic on our social media. The analytics we keep on that jumped. The same for the analytics that we keep on our website. We saw all those kind of jump. As soon as the campaign started, everything kind of ticked up and kind of held out throughout election day. So
What social media do you currently have?
we official accounts are LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We mostly use Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter because Dallas County as a government has their own LinkedIn, and we have a kind of a separate one, so we're not too active on LinkedIn. But we'll actually start picking that up.
Have you tried anything with Nextdoor, if there's anything there, so?
So, yeah, I think I know City of Dallas and other certain government agencies have Nextdoor accounts, and I've used that before for previous jobs, but we haven't actually started that yet here, so.
And, do we do any, we're good at providing lists of locations.
Yeah.
Voters have a map spotting option, kind of like you're looking for a restaurant, give me your zip code and I'll tell you your closest options.
Yeah, so we actually have that's part of our, I don't know if you're gonna cover that in our GIS part, but we have location finder, and what we added to that location finder for this November election was driving directions. So if you go to our website or you see one of the ads on Facebook or whatever.
In the listing ads in the newspaper as an example, that you have a map spotting option?
No, I think the only thing we do with print media is the notices we have to legally put out. But I think
As we not consider adding in map spotting, notice within the listing of addresses, or?
I think what we found is paper.
and expensive.
Who gets newspapers
Yeah,
anymore?
and so within the electronic version, we have QR codes in there, so you can scan and you can get right to these applications.
And that
How
map,
does that change it? That can't change.
No, it's pretty sad. If you
We're
went,
talking about which votes.
oh, no, yeah, but it links to our lookup, which that sheet.
and that gets
Okay,
up.
yeah,
got
yeah.
it.
So we keep the same QR code and the same URL links for that. And those go live. We have two separate ones. We have an early vote and an election day.
Yeah.
And so we have different schedules, our e-date, where we go live for early vote, and close off the election day, then close off the early vote and put up the election day. So whenever you go to those QR codes, it goes to the correct link. With the updated
So what's the
locations.
link?
Nick, was there any efforts to coordinate with school districts, government teachers, websites, different high schools, for example, or rec centers, to see if they would post it on their website?
Yeah, so we started reaching out to them whenever, I think it was this body, we discussed kind of limiting, was it the May elections where we kind of went down to a small amount?
Yeah.
We reached out to them. We found out on most of their sites, they do a good job of putting election information on their stuff, and it links directly to our website. So we were going through, we started emailing them, and then we started going through the websites, and most of them, whether it's our small ones like Walmart or our big ones like City of Dallas, if you go to their city page, they have an election tab usually there, that links to us.
I don't know if this was a new thing, but this year, my child's been DISD for 5 years now, 6 years.
And this was the first time I got a robocall. I don't know if you guys knew about it or were involved, but I received a robocall from Dallas ISD saying, don't forget, like, it's election day, like, tomorrow coming up. There were two robocalls.
And that kind of highlights, kind of, we want to give you the tools to go vote. I think the local campaigns, they do a pretty good job of contacting you to let you know an election's coming, right? We had a governor's race that there's a lot of money spent saying, hey, there's an election coming. And so part of our mission is let you know there's an election coming, but let you know where to find that information, right? Whether it's mail, when you need to be registered, where to go vote. So it's, yeah, some people reach out, so it's election, we do vote.
And a lot of those campaigns reach out to candidates, to people, voters who are likely to vote or have voted in the past, not really reaching out to potential new voters or other voters that maybe we would like to reach.
And so when ABI came, so we worked really closely with ABI to kind of figure out what channels we wanted to go through. And we increased that spend. I think what they recommended was a lot more television. We know, doing our homework, we know morning TV and evening news networks tend to go to an older audience, and that audience tends to vote. So we actually increased the ad spend for social media. And we were on Instagram, which is a bit younger than Facebook, and stream. So we increased the spend away from TV, which was still a very good buy, still a party buy, and we asked them to go towards streaming and social media.
Cable is cheaper than TV.
Oh, yeah, and we get a lot better, we get Nielsen ratings for TV, right? Which is a survey, maybe you answer, maybe you don't. Were you watching that time? We don't know if you were watching. When it comes to Hulu and Peacock and all those other streaming services, we know who's watching, and we know you can't skip that ad, right? So it allows us to target. The more information we have, and we have a lot of information about voters, allows us to really target specific voters and just get. I like digital ads a lot more. The metrics are better, measurements are better. We get to target a lot better.
They have a breakdown of the Spanish versus English versus Vietnamese, and
We do actually. It was part of the attachment to the commissioner's report. We can get that to you.
Michael, I think maybe a side effect of SB1 with campaigns is they were reluctant to send out ballot by mail application, facsimiles, and so I don't know whether that's going to continue or not.
I think the campaigns were going to do it, it's government officials.
They weren't putting out ballot by mail application facsimiles from campaigns.
And just, and we'll get you those spins, but just one thing to kind of note is the amount to buy is based on overall viewership. So your English channels, the spin is going to be higher in English than Spanish and Spanish than Vietnamese. That's mostly not because we weren't saturating it. That's just mostly because the audiences are bigger, so we have to pay more for those ad placements. So you might see, and I mean, we only had Viet TV and I think 2 Vietnamese radio stations, and those ad buys are incredibly cheap. So it wasn't that we weren't saturating it. It was they have a lower audience, therefore we pay a cheaper rate. Any other questions?
I noticed when we first started, during this term period, you hired. I was just wondering what other staffing you had. You have people who are more focused on different areas. I noticed someone's taking pictures now.
Yeah, we're trying to kind of utilize our social media better.
Okay.
So we're producing a lot more content for that. It was Esmeralda, and y'all know Esmeralda, doing 3 jobs.
Yeah.
And so now Esmeralda's doing 2 jobs, and I'm doing 1 job. And so we're, as we keep staffing up, I think we still have 1 more open position. We'll be able to kind of focus on what we're doing. And eventually Esmeralda will have 1 job. And so,
By the way, it's Nick's birthday. Thanks.
so spinning it with me.
So for 2023, we're working to formalize an outreach plan. And so that feedback that you guys give is, keep in mind, since Nick got here about a year ago now, he's been drinking through a fire hose. So it's been a busy year. So We haven't really had the time to kind of formalize, our long-term communication plan, but of course, it has hampered us in getting the work done. But we're going to try to do a little bit more long-term planning, and so that feedback is helpful. We're going to try to increase, have a year-round in-person presence within the community, not just at election time, as far as education involvement in the community. And I think that's one of the positions that we're hiring is a new outreach coordinator. Try to improve the quality and frequency of our communications with cities and school districts. We've got a pretty good partnership, but we really want to give them a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to them, work closer with them on a day-to-day basis. We want to potentially, we tweaked our website and made it look a little bit better, but we're contemplating a whole rebuild of that. That's probably, I don't know, that's a big job. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're going to continue to tweak our website to make it better. And we're going to hire a Vietnamese coordinator to increase our recruitment of Vietnamese translators. We do have a temp worker now who's done the translations, but we're in the middle of hiring that position, a full-time position, to have a better outreach effort to the community. Voter registration system, this is an area that's pretty much been status quo. We haven't done much with voter registration other than our VDRs. But in 2023, we're looking to incorporate the use of technology, more for file maintenance, the use of NCOAs, things like that, to keep our list clean and to, maybe do more outreach with that, analysis of our voter registration patterns, things like that. Revision of all of our written communications to our voters, all of our letters and things like that. We're going to make a big effort to write in plain language. So what you really want to do with your communications to voters is get it down to about a 6th grade level. And instead of talking like a lawyer, you got to talk, so people actually read it. And so that's one of the big issues I have, frankly, with the state of Texas. You look at our mail ballot applications and all of our mail ballot materials, it's just gobs and gobs of verbiage. And when you see just a big pile of words, you don't read it. So everything we do here, including our, written communications, we spend that time to try to get things to bullet points, simple words, not talking like lawyers, so that people actually read.
Michael?
Yes, there's online, there's a question first. So the question was,
Whose job is to decide the bond issues?
so that would, who's ever creating the bond, like the city, it's the city attorneys there, et cetera. So we simply print what they give us.
Plain language. written.
What was the question?
We're talking about communications, and my question was, whose job is it to decide for the bond issue? Because the way they're written is going.
Yeah, ballot language is typically decided by the jurisdiction. And then they give it to us. So we really have no say in that. We just print what they tell us. Online, there was a question?
Yes, my question is, are you aware of any efforts toward online voter registration?
There is a bill in the legislature, like there is every session, for online registration. And someday, state of Texas is going to get into the 1990s and have online registration. So yeah, that is something that we are absolutely for. As far as revision of our VDR infrastructure, I know Esmeralda, and they've been working to not only recruit VDRs, but tie VDRs to events, just like poll workers. We don't just recruit poll workers and say, go to any polling place you want. We tie them to those polling places. So we want to provide more tools to our VDRs to help them get to events. Then expansion of our voter registration efforts. We've got some ideas we've kind of talked about past that we're exploring.
I guess the urban myth continues that there's all these dead voters on the voter registration rolls. I don't believe that anymore because there's so many resources now for taking them on.
We do a pretty good job with our listing.
You get your reports regularly from
Oh, yeah.
the county clerk's office.
Yes.
They got responsibility for,
We, Remy and our voter registration department, they keep our list very clean. But with the use of NCOAs, we want to continue to do that. So in NCOA, you get a list from the post office who's moved on a regular basis. I think the state of Texas does that once every 2 years now, which is not adequate. Should be done quarterly or maybe monthly. And so I believe the state of Texas has now joined ERIC, which is this consortium of 30 states that they look at each other's voter registrations lists, and, moves and all that sort of thing. And with ERIC, they require you to do more frequent NCOAs. So we're going to find out more from the state how often they're going to do them. We may supplement that. It's always good to keep your list clean.
voter registration certificates that don't come back to you that should.
And it helps in many ways because, the voters that come to the polling place, and so, they're updating, they don't have to go through this painful process of updating their addresses at that time. As far as our 2022 mail ballot team, I already mentioned, we had a major change from paper to electronic records. I also mentioned the really difficult to read instructions. So what we did is we kind of went out on a limb this year and said, here's some abbreviated mail ballot instructions, the way they should be written. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We still included the state required stuff, but we kind of people waited on. So you don't really need to read that, read ours. And so we believe that helps people navigate. We're doing what we can to get people to help them navigate red tape. Mail ballot applications, we had 14,928 since. That's not completely accurate because there was people who applied early in the year for year-round applications.
Annual application.
Annual applications. And then since, I think, the June 18th election, we had 14,928. Of those, 1,460 were rejected, which was 9.8%. Still too high.
What was the major reason, or was there a major reason why they were?
Melissa, you, off the top of your head, do you remember, Melissa, I can't remember. I wanted to quote.
Yeah, I think the number one is still the missing or incorrect ID information. We kind of looked, different age groups have different reasons. There's those who are not over 65. I think the second highest reason is they use an in-county address. So they're going to be out of county, but the address they put to send it to is still an in-county address, and that can't be. So those would be the top 2 reasons.
We need to realize there's a list of reasons that can be rejected. One of those is, a wife decides we'll save postage, which is already on there, and put the husband's and the wife's ballots together in the same.
Now, right now, we're talking about applications. You're talking about back.
Submitted.
Yeah, so there's a variety of reasons for rejecting ballots, and there's a variety of reasons for rejecting applications. What we try to do is to lower those numbers by creating better materials. And then reacting, getting a hold of those people to say, hey, you've been rejected here, what can you do to fix it?
There's still a lot of lack of clarity when people check off annual application and they don't remember that they've done that.
Yeah. I mean, this is.
Michael, were these 1460, were they able to cure a percentage of them? Or?
They were offered an opportunity to cure, but they didn't. Okay. And so, I don't know what the cure rate was. As far as mail ballots, we sent out 28,144. Of course, you guys, I'm sure you've heard about that we had to resend about 10,000 within 3 days of the initial mailing. Big mistake on our part as far as missing writing lines. The interesting thing about that was I didn't realize this in Texas. Write-ins are very rare. The last write-in that we had was 2018. There was no write-in in 2020. So, new staff, not new staff, but, didn't have the experience, had never dealt with writing before. So, what we're doing is we're revisiting, rewriting from scratch our entire proofing process. That's just bumped up the priorities, right? Because that was one of those things, bad thing that happened. The good thing is that we responded to that quickly and it ended up not being a problem. As far as total received, there were 24,155 received. Total rejected, 602. There was those that were rejected because of SB1, because of missing or incorrect ID was 318. So that's pretty low. I mean, that's still too high, but it's pretty low. 1.3% reject rate compared to 6% in the primary level. So people are starting to get used to this idea that we say, when in doubt, fill them both out, put out your social security number as well as your driver's license number on everything so that things match up and you're not rejected. The SB1 rules. Mail ballot teams for plans for 2023. We may have RFP to hire a vendor to print, package, and send our ballots. I don't know when that might happen. I hope to have that happen before the presidential election. We're at that point now where we're getting just big enough to have a vendor help us instead of do things by hand. I usually say it's about $50,000. I think we had the last presidential we had 1,000. So it's time to move to a vendor. Vendor can do it much quicker and much cheaper and more accurate. So I think it's time. You got to remember, I come from a state where we're used to dealing with 500,000 mail ballots rather than 50,000. So I think we need to talk with those vendors to move. Our Agilist ballot sorter, SB1 made it become semi-obsolete. We were looking to potentially replace that. I don't know, it may not get on this year's agenda because we got workarounds for it. And then new ballot tracking through the mail system. So I keep hearing about students, for instance, say they sent their ballot, but we never got it. Or we sent a ballot to them and they never received it. And so this reminds me of back in 2008, when I had 18,000 ballots in the city and county of Denver that we sent our list to the vendor never sent 18,000 ballots out. We started getting calls from people, where's my ballot, where's my ballot? And we fixed it, but I remember saying, there's got to be a vendor out there that tracks ballots. There wasn't. There's no such thing. And so we partnered with a company, a local company in Denver, and we built the nation's first mail ballot tracking system called Ballot Trace. We won awards for it. It was a big deal. It was, and it's a huge deal now in Denver. Colorado is a vote by mail state, so there's a lot of demand for it. So basically, you can sign up for this system where you get text messages, emails, or voicemail, robocalls, where it says, your ballot has been printed today. Your ballot has been delivered to the post office today. Your ballot is being delivered to your home today. And it tracks through the entire mail process. And so what that helped do was it helped us. Ballot Trace was an acronym for tracking, reporting, and communications. And the tracking was for us internally, so we could say, where the heck are our ballots? And the reporting was for the voter themselves, where they could see that information themselves. And what that really did is that made the post office do a much better job of delivering. Our non-delivery rates really improved because they knew someone was watching. And what you'll find with the post office is, remember having a meeting with the post office about non-delivery. It said about 10% of their work, this was a long time ago, so I don't know what it's like today, but the time they said the post office had about a 10% absentee rate every single day. So when they had substitute carriers and things like that, it was problematic where they didn't deliver or they didn't want to deliver that. So there's lots of reasons for that non-delivery, and there's ways to combat it. And so we may try that here. I don't know how economically feasible it is with the vendor doing such a small, because we're a big jurisdiction, we're the 8th largest in the country, but for mail, we're still pretty small. So we're going to look into that to see whether or not it's worthwhile to get that mail ballot tracking system that now, the one that we built in 2009 in Denver is now nationwide. The entire state of California bought it. Colorado, the state of Colorado bought it. So it's really pretty cool. So we'll look into that. Voting science team in 2022, we had improved communications internally. We had a lot of turnover in that department this last year, and so we had some difficult times in primary election. But we really hired a lot of new people who worked pretty well. New cell phone and email procedures, new newsletter that we sent out to the poll workers. Because, you know, we want those poll workers to feel part of us year round and not just at election time. We did phase 1 of our software development, collaboration software for the parties. So there could be real-time sharing of information with the parties, and poll worker mapping software so that the party could see where their, you know, a poll worker could be mapped to their location. And so it really was addressing this problem. You know, parties drive this up until 20 days prior to the election. And so they send us a spreadsheet, and the minute they hit send, it becomes obsolete. And then when we send them a spreadsheet back, the minute we hit send, it becomes obsolete. So we really wanted this real-time sharing so that we could collaborate better. So because the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they're part of our team. We're part of their team. So that phase 1 of the software development went really well. It was kind of late arriving for this election. I think we got it end of September maybe. But we got it and it helped. And so we look forward to it in the future elections, continue to refine that. We may rebuild our entire poll worker management system. I don't know, that's a big deal. Because right now we use an outside vendor for that. And it's pretty good, but it's not as good as we want. We collaborated with parties, Power to the Polls, and Vet to Vote. Power to the Polls and Vet to Vote were fantastic in recruiting poll workers, and the parties recruiting poll workers. We collaborated with the Commissioners Court to increase poll worker pay for training and for setting up 9/4. Collaborated with our county poll employees for backup poll workers. We used them in May. We had no need to use county poll workers as backups in November because we had a surplus of workers. And we had, for the general election, we had 3,493 workers, we had 523 students, and standby workers that we didn't even use, there was 347. So great job for that. Question?
Do you think the increase of students available was thanks to Dallas ISD having that day as a holiday and gives the chance for a lot of high school kids to work on that day?
I would assume so. I don't know that, but that's probably a great, you know, one of the reasons that those students wanted to work. And so we had great cooperation with the students. We love the students.
Yes, they did great. They did fabulous, yeah.
2023 plans, we may do phase 2 of our software development, depends on where our priorities for that go. Because the top priority right now is to do this payroll issues. Develop and complete comprehensive vote center location evaluations. So this is a big deal. See these iPads? We put a survey, I got it, put it up on screen, but basically, when it comes to our vote center locations, we have very bad intelligence. We don't know very much about our vote centers. And so we don't know how big the rooms are, we don't know how big the lighting is, we don't know what the power, you know, how much power they have. We don't know a lot of things. We don't know ADA compliance. And so we are now resurveying all of our locations. We send someone out with this iPad. On this iPad, there's a survey, question by question, fill this out, fill this out. All done electronically in real time. Then they get to a point that says, take a picture of the room, take a picture of this, video of the room. And so and it's, once we have this done, completed, we will have fantastic intelligence on our polling places, which ties into another project I mentioned.
One of the issue is we issue X number of e-poll book configurations, and then the wiring or the connectivity doesn't match up. What we deliver doesn't match up with the number of e-poll books for that location.
Yeah, you got 10 e-poll, you got 10 e-poll books, you got, or whatever, 6 e-poll books, 20 machines, and there's no place to plug it in.
And not enough cords.
Not enough cords, and so that's all that intelligence that we're gonna put together so that we can supply those supplies more accurately.
There should be one power strip with each poll book configuration at a minimum, and we haven't been providing that.
I agree.
Michael, on all of this software development, the plans, I actually think that's an excellent idea. Was that a best practice from another elections department, or was that just a brainchild you guys thought through?
I believe that's been done in other churches. But this was the internally developed one. You can go to vendors and buy it, but we like to. So these were actually from COVID. These iPads were, you know, the county had bought. I think we had 300, 100 of them in the county after the COVID relief stuff at Fair Park. Prepare and present vote center usage statistics and availability to the BCAC. So the BCAC, as you guys know, because you were invited last night, so we're trying to give as much statistics to that group so that they can make wise decisions. In concert with the BCAC, presented the 2023 vote center plan to commissioners court, and then to present judge appointment recommendations to commissioners court in August that kind of mirror those vote center recommendations, and you guys may have a part of that as far as some complaint process. Training, 2022 status with the new training facility next door. I really want to take you guys on a tour on that. We thought about doing that tonight. I don't think we're gonna have time unless you guys want to stay late. But we want to give you a tour of this facility and the new facility. We'll have to maybe do that at a future meeting. We have a lot more time. We revised our train the trainer program. We revised our judge smartphone training. You know, we have smartphones out at every location on the judges use. We revised that. And then we revised our provisional ballot process training. We developed new recorded equipment training. So instead of just an instructor up there, we had recorded training to be more consistent in our training. In addition to our last year we recorded a lot of stuff. We re-recorded it this year. We had Nick, and so he hired a new professional voice. So it found a much more professional presentation. New safety training for our coworkers, in line with our safety program. And then we trained 3,292 workers. In 2023, and by the way, I should mention, we did, where we could, we followed the CEAC subcommittee's training recommendations. That's helpful. 2023, we're going to expand the scope of the training responsibilities of our training department beyond just poll workers, but to our staff. So we're giving them more and more responsibilities, having a true training department. Logistics team, consolidation of our 3 election warehouses into now our campus here, these 2 warehouses, and we modified our operational plans. We developed new paper checklists, and we major revisions, so that the proper equipment and supplies are distributed to locations. People are held accountable when they're not. Major revisions of our plans to deliver equipment for 2 elections that were just 17 days apart. I mean, typically we deliver stuff, we pick it up. And then 6 months later, we deliver stuff and we pick it up. Huge operation. We had 2 countywide elections 17 days apart where we had to simultaneously deliver and pick up and rotate, and it was a huge deal. And So the logistics team did a great job of that. Provisional envelopes in the general election, there was 14,000 in the field to serve 3,000 voters, but we had scattered shortages. This was a black eye for us where we had some shortages. And some of that was because of unexpected high volumes at 6 college locations. But some of it was because of logistics team errors where they did not properly fill out their checklists to make sure that the proper amounts were going to the location. So that's something we got to tighten up. Election operations, but the elections operations team reacted. So that's part of our monitoring and our whole system here. When there was a shortage, we reacted to things out as soon as possible. 2023 plans, employees just mentioned that, errors regarding checklists, we got to coach people up, to show them why we have checklists and the importance of using them, develop digitalized checklists, probably with iPads, for inventory control, or get a better grasp of our election supplies, equipment, inventory. Finalize our move out of the Lincoln Street warehouse, because we got a whole bunch of obsolete records down there that now we, because of court cases that have finished, we can get rid of a lot of stuff. And then surplus our remaining obsolete equipment. I think at one point in time I showed you guys pictures of our Lincoln Street warehouse and big mess we had down there. It was like a hoarder's house. We had 30 years of stuff that we've been getting rid of for the last year and a half. Central Count team, new layout of our Central Count station. When we do a tour, we'll show you that. More space, more equipment, monitors, seating. That really paid huge dividends this last year when we had a lot of poll watchers, a lot of workers in that. It's a state-of-the-art facility now. New live streaming on our website and the ballot handling areas, that's a requirement of SB1. Continued migration away from dependence on ES&S. We used to pay ES&S to do all of our work for us, and now we do the work ourselves, and we have ES&S here, looking over our shoulder, being coaching us, and that's the proper role for a vendor, especially because vendors are quite expensive. To the tune of like $1,800 per person. So we should be doing that work if we're taking that on. Faster and more reliable U.S. results, stick handling procedures. In other words, we've got this part of this new comprehensive Central County Station operating plan that we, instead of being a 2-page outline, it's now a detailed procedure document. We did have some issues in the general election. I already mentioned the proofing regarding the write-ins. And then there was an ES&S technical issue. This wasn't our issue. This was a technical issue regarding the initial omitted cast. There was cast vote records that were not included in our results. So it was a technical deal that we're still working with ES&S on. The good news is, in Central County, the biggest deal was that parties did a fantastic job of supplying the workers needed to manually count 160,000 write-in ballots for the 301st Judicial District. That's never been done. Usually write-ins, there's 200-300 votes for any particular candidate. We had 160,000 because there were no official candidates for that race. So it was all write-ins. And so we had teams and teams of people counting those and doing that in a timely fashion. And that's mostly because of party volunteers. 2023 plan, we're going to work with the ES&S to upgrade and improve our ballot tabulation infrastructure. Remember, we talked about Southwest. Well, we got new computers coming. They're going to be delivered probably next week. Reconfiguring. We're continuing to get training from ES&S for where we're going to do our own ballot design and layout. Remember that at the end, the new law that required at the end of this year where you had to review all the new candidates, elected candidates, being that next, more. It was quite confusing. That was kind of ballot layout. What we want to do is the vendor just they're running through, they're doing hundreds of people's ballots. And so they did their job correctly. But we want to do that job better, where we pay more attention. We lay out the ballot, we look at design and make things a little bit easier for the voter.
We gotta make sure there's no ambiguity when the voter is finished with their ballot.
That's
They need to
correct.
know they are finished, and you need to tell it to print. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then review and complete, do a complete revision of the ballot proving process rather than a ballot proving review. We're going to rebuild it from the ground up. Election hardware team successfully utilized ESNS as trainers and advisors rather than doing the work. And we contracted with a local technical labor GTS company to help us do that. And technical labor was so much more helpful than just hiring plain temps. So they were more expensive, but they did a really good job of programming our equipment. We revised and expanded our election day hardware response team and the infrastructure of the team we had in these rooms. We expanded our election equipment preparation space because we now have the room. All of our electronic equipment's here, all of our supplies are across the street. We got plenty of room to lay out and do our work.
Michael, can we, there's a question. ES&S had installed some modems in DS200s. Are we able to certify that there are
There are no modems in here. One of those.
Was that an urban?
That's a rumor control thing. Yeah, that's not true. Okay. So we did have the issues that were reported. All of our statistical categories improved as far as hardware. But the report, as far as electronic poll books, we deployed 22,183. We had preparation issues of 0.8%, so we could have done a better job of preparing them. So less than 1%. Technical issues with the hardware, 6.1%, which is a little too high in my mind. User errors is 1.6%, which isn't too bad. Slowness of downloads, and so the big problem, what everyone knows about, was the slowness of downloads of the voter history. So basically, someone comes in to vote, we record them, that gets downloaded. It's downloaded to a central server, and then it's uploaded back to the other machines in Proctown. The downloads were working properly. Uploads were slow. So there was a traffic problem with the vendor system. And so then when the uploads at 7 o'clock, when the traffic was slowed down, stopped, the uploads started catching up. And so people were sitting at their machines saying, there's people voting after 7 o'clock. That's what it looked like. It was a perception issue, not a real issue. But we're working with the vendor and having some very serious discussions about how they're fixing it. They've got a solution where it's got to hold their feet apart and make sure it happens.
It looked like people were checking in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Michael, did anybody ever do any thinking on, you recall the situation I talked about where a voter presented the Illinois or Indiana driver's license that scanned in, and my worker looked at the driver's license before he gave it back to the voter, that there was not a Texas driver's license. And nobody could figure why that would happen unless there was a counterfeit driver's license.
Yeah, that's one of those things where when I hear something like that, I need names.
Yeah.
Right? Because I need to look that up, because until then it's an urban legend, right? And so, so I can't, there's nothing I can do with that unless I have names or a license or, to find out how to research.
Because I could find them, they were in my precinct on the other street.
That'd be great, because, I don't know what the issue is. But the issue is not, I need the issue clarified, and then we need to research. Anything you can provide would be fantastic.
That was a weird one.
Yeah. Issues in the general election as far as the voting machines, there were 33,909 deployed. Preparations, 2%, a little higher than our equal books. Technical issues, 2.8%, not too bad. User error issues, 1%, not too bad. Vote tabulators, 515 were deployed. ECD preparation issues, 4.6%, and I'm not happy about that one. That mostly had to do with the the voter, that the rolls of paper, they weren't used completely in some instances, not putting fresh rolls in. So not a major issue, but irritating one. Yeah.
So it's your intent to put fresh rolls
Yeah,
in?
there's supposed to be fresh rolls before they ever leave. So that was someone not following their checklist. Technical issues, there was 6.4%. That mostly had to do with, they were maintenance issues. Just so you know, there's 30 ES and S employees here, who've been here for the last 2 weeks, and will be here for another 2 weeks or so, where they're doing their semi-annual maintenance on all the machines. And what we found in doing that maintenance, there's a little, so funny, some of these ballots were getting, they were jamming when they were going through those machines. And it was a little piece of rubberized thing that was, it's like holding a piece of electronic equipment in place. It was getting stretched out through time. And it was hard for me to describe, but basically the string was falling down and getting in the path of paper and blocking. So it was a little tiny issue that's, until the machines get older, you just don't know. So they've got a solution, they're fixing it, but that was the majority of those technical. And, you know, and then user errors, 10.3%. I think that had to do, I can't remember what that was, but it was something where we can correct with better training. Impatience of some of our coworkers, especially during early voting, pulling. What was that?
I think a lot of it was trying to submit the ballots that were incomplete because of the transferring from the ballot marking device where they had the blank ballots. So.
So we have a blank ballot. So because of that next more issue, some people were escaping out of it, and so it would kick out their ballot blank rather than printing. It wasn't a completed ballot, so they'd say, "Well, I voted." They'd see a barcode did. They tried to run it through, and it didn't.
They thought it would capture their progress, and it doesn't.
Right. I think that's what. Yeah. So, you know, some issues to work through on those, you know, so that's why we try to look at these issues and to analyze what get to the root cause. 2023 plans, biannual maintenance is taking place right now. Huge project that has about 10,000 pieces of equipment. Continued improvement in quality and promise of our technical repair services. Continued automation of our hardware help desk dispatch. It's pretty cool. We got, this looks like from Omaha, the Strategic Air Command. I actually just worked in that. We have these giant things up on screen. Nuclear war and all that. And that's kind of what we try to replicate here, where we're putting maps up and what's going on out in the field. And so we're going to continue to improve that automation.
With the electronic error, now that I understand what you're talking about, it should have some kind of facsimile about what a valid ballot looks like when it comes out of, because if they don't know what it looks like, some of them think it's invisible. And I had a few of those.
Yeah.
It's not underneath the checklist to get to look at a ballot. And when somebody says to you, "Is this right?" and it's blank, I said, "Well, no, that's not right." But they can't know that.
Yeah.
So
it's simply a training issue.
Or, yeah, for the public, I think.
Yeah.
Show them what it's supposed to look like when it comes back out. Actually, it's supposed to have something on it.
Yeah.
It's something simple like that. Because it can't be on the checklist that we look at the ballot.
Yeah, that's true.
It can't be on the checklist.
It's a good point. So that's something we got to contemplate. And hopefully we avoid that problem by better ballot design too, so that we don't get those kicking out. But when they do, we should have something.
Yeah, it's not invisible.
Yeah, I got you. Digitized, just like with our supply list, digitized checklist for our equipment preparation, using iPads, et cetera. Improved inventory control of our equipment. We're going for a major inventory. We're just opening boxes that sitting, you know, that equipment that we purchased 3 years ago that we never used. Opening those up, putting those into the inventory, putting it into the rotation, getting a true, accurate inventory of our equipment, which we've never had. Because frankly, because we didn't have the space to do it, we had these warehouses all around the county. Equipment scattered everywhere, now we've got the facilities to do it. GIS team, redistricting, increasing, I talked about that already as far as round 1, round 2, and now round 3. Developed multiple GIS tools. We got a fantastic GIS team where they produce all sorts of internal tools with maps and things like that. But it's not just maps, but the data behind the map that we use internally. External tools, that's the big one Nick mentioned. The wait time tool where we put in our advertisements and our commercial. What we found is that for early voting, 1 out of every 2 voters use that. The numbers say, and so that really helped distribute people so they weren't going to a place where they had to wait in line. So the average wait time for early voting voters was 1.2 minutes, which is extremely low. Average wait time for election day was 3.7 minutes, but there's a little caveat to that. There was a certain percentage of our poll workers that just simply refused to fill out that wait time ticket. It was a very simple process. Some of them, that's going to go on the report card. Right? So we're going to report them and say exactly because that helps the voter, right? And so those locations, there might have been a location that had a 10-minute wait that no one knew about because they weren't reporting their wait time. So we've got to get after them on that. But overall, the wait time throughout the county was pretty low.
As part of the vote center process, I just wonder if there's any way to do here a map using GIS to show voter density by precinct, something that could be considered visually then, or does that make sense?
What I understand what you're saying, and we would use something like that internally. We would never use that externally because we would have to keep everything, just like plain language, we have to keep everything simple for voters. And the wait time tool is very simple to use. Where you go to, I don't know if you guys did anyone use it? You just go to the website, you see green lights, that means it's a 0 to 15 minute wait. You see a yellow light, that's a 15 to 30 minute wait. You see a red light, that's more than a 30 minute wait. You get very few red lights, if any. You get some yellows and mostly green. But in addition to that, you click on the button, you see the number of voters that voted there, blah, blah, blah. So you feed people the information they need and no more.
Was this the first time you guys had that?
It was attempted in 2020, but it didn't work, mostly because the process was, the poll workers didn't do it because it wasn't trained well enough. It was new, and so we had more time to think about it, really do it right.
I think, yeah, I'm sure you will. I don't think that, I actually used it because I showed some of the voters, they didn't know about it. But I know I'm sure that'll be me. This is the first time.
I was pretty pleased during early voting to see, 1 out of 2 voters with this statistic show. So that's a really high rate. I don't know what the rate was on election day. I think it's considerably lower.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of election.
As far as 2023, I already mentioned this round 3 of incorporating our additional city boundaries, which we just completed. But we are going to do proofing project where we're going to actually, our team has done it. We've completed our work, but we're hiring an outside vendor to look over our shoulder and make sure it's right prior to the May election. Software and tech support. We stabilized our infrastructure, so working with DHS, looking at that potentially rotted infrastructure and found some vulnerabilities, fixed them. The IT team's been fantastic and just kind of helping us reset up our infrastructure internally. I mentioned the DHS audit, and then consolidation of our telecommunications plans. In other words, all those Wi-Fi's and cradle points, things like that, we were spending tons and tons of money. So we consolidated our efforts and we shut them off between elections, so we're not paying $100 a month in service, we're paying 10 cents a month, whatever it might be. So just kind of looking at how we're billed and and trying to save the county some money so that we can use that money for other purposes to help voters. So 2023, create technical training course, leveraging LinkedIn Learning. I talked about that a little bit. Develop customized training for internally developed software. You know, so we develop our own software. They don't have anything on LinkedIn Learning, so we have to do our own training internally. We'll finalize our vulnerability assessment with DHS. You know, kind of continue to look for those vulnerabilities and remediate. And then finalize our disaster recovery and business continuity plans, our COOP, which is, you know, they have a backup site, so where we can count votes in case we have a tornado or something bad happen. So feedback on the tactical plan and general election, the things that we just talked about. Any thoughts? Questions?
I think it certainly will be, how are you benchmarking success? Tactical plan could be 3 years, 5 years. How are you going to look at, and then how are you going to report back out to us the success associated with the plan?
It's really tough. I mean, measurables in elections, there's so many variables. It's hard to get accurate measurement. So, you know, you can say, oh, is it voter turnout? Is we don't control voter turnout? Is it, you know, air? I mean, there's just, it's very difficult. And so those are the types of things your feedback would be helpful. What would be the citizens election advisory committee? What would you want to see as measurables? And when we develop our OKRs, our objectives and key results, we have to have measurables for those. So we try to measure what we can, but some things are just not measurable. But we're always thinking about new ways to measure our success.
Well, I think as you look at your plan, it would be good, maybe frankly, just even for our conversations, the same way you had complete, almost complete, you know, some type of, you could take these same slides in that same fashion and kind of even stoplight it for us to see how you're tracking towards what you're doing. Although to your point, you know, you've got this more detail in the details.
Yeah, so you'll see a lot of that in here.
Correct.
Right.
But I just think for us, it gives us the assurance of saying, okay, you're on the right plan with your tactical plan. You're delivering towards your plan. And then here are kind of some of the key obstacles that may have barriers to success in your plan so that we still have that visibility. Because this is a very thorough, comprehensive view. And I just would love to see the fruits out of that understanding periodically.
I think what's also helpful is prioritize. I mean,
That's
you
exactly
can't,
right.
you can't do everything.
You can't boil the ocean on that.
And so what, and since day one here, I've been kind of waiting. What do I think is the most important? And so the problem is you fix 1 through 10, and then you have a problem on number 11, right, in the priorities. And someone says, well, why didn't you fix number 11? Well, we prioritize 1 through 10. And so we having people weigh in, what's the most important things to fix?
Well, let me ask this question then. The audit that was done in the 2020 and the findings that were associated with that, do you feel a lot of the tactical plan addresses
I think
100% of those? Is there some exposure?
We're looking at that right now, probably 95%. But we're looking to see if you missed it.
That's because I think that'll be critically important, right? As you think about the work that you're doing in this detail, and does it address it?
Right. Okay.
A question about how the data is gathered for things like the technical issue and severe issue. Is it only, how is that getting?
So that's everything, every single call that we get, we log into our Ask Ed help desk system. And we try to make sure that our operators put as much information in as possible. And we're going to continue trying to refine that system. That's what Jayla's back there taking pictures. She's in charge of that. And so trying to improve, and we've been improving it, but you know, we want to continue to improve it so that we get that granularity of the information so that we can analyze those issues and really determine, was this a user error, was this a technical error, was this bad training, you know. So it's a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science, but we're trying to make more of a science.
What happens when someone calls their party office and the party office actually You get that data at all?
What we try to tell the parties is, what do we say, Bonnie? Put it in writing. Put it in writing, send us an email so we can log it. Because we take all those emails, we log them. We take all those phone calls, we log them. Everything, we want to get it down so that, you know, we can stick our head in the sand and pretend those issues don't exist. And say, our numbers look great, there's no problems. But we want to know the problems so that we can fix them. Any others? A little bit more, I think.
Before talking about the tactical plan, but specifically for comms. I don't know if it's anecdotal, but when you go to schools, it seems like there's a lot more students who don't have voter IDs, identification cards, and I don't know what the use is. You kind of look into it, how often these young people are utilizing the certificate selection, ID certification, firing of the vote. Love to know what those numbers are. I'd love for the election department communicating with these young people. Reasonable kind of affidavit or requirements really scary. It's not.
Yeah.
If they don't have it, it's not going to vote. A situation where we can determine the numbers of young people who are actually utilizing the certificate and or maybe utilizing groups to have them access that, making it more accessible. Working with DPS, for example, to try to make it easier for them to acquire this stuff. But I'd love to know the numbers. How many are actually using it? How many would benefit from using it? So just back to comms, for at the very least to disseminate that information.
Yeah. I think I see my comms team back there typing, right? That great feedback. And we'll see what we can do with that.
Not for the chair,
I think
to
we
our
have-
school,
I'm sorry.
making those same kind of pitches, we would have anybody doing that, because a lot of times they don't even know that that's the thing.
Yeah, and I know that that's, remember, that's one of the reasons that we're hiring another outreach person. So we got Esmeralda and someone else. So Esmeralda's kind of doing the free jobs. So we're staffing up with our comm team, to try to have more outreach.
Our chair does that for us.
On high schools too, I doubt that there are many principals that are proactive with their registrar role in high schools. So.
Yeah, remember that I talked about the increased activity with our voter registration outreach, where we can, and I was a little bit vague with some of that, but it's not only high schools, but it's those, we've talked about this, Eric, is the voter registration agencies. By federal law, certain government agencies, every time they interact with a person, they're supposed to offer a voter registration. What we find is that a lot of them don't do that. So what we want to do is work with those agencies, have a better measurement of what cards they're passing out, so that we can say, look like you're passing out the cards that you're supposed to be passing out. So that's a kind of building the program. That's something we did in my last county. We worked with the ACLU on that. We were kind of the carrot, they were kind of the stick, where they said, listen, you've got a job to do by federal law, you need to do it. We were there to help assist them.
Motor voter effectiveness is
Exactly.
It's kind of questionable.
Exactly. So I think that's a big growth area for us, but it's third, seventh priority student. But that's one of the reasons we're growing our outreach. Question.
I believe it's the e-poll book, where we scan either the driver's license or the registration card, and it picks up the information.
Yes.
Very easy, very convenient. I think if we are, send more messages, that it's great for people to bring their voter registration card, because it's the most current. And it's very easy, they tied to the e-poll book. Many times people just bring us the driver's license. The driver's license is not up to date on the addresses. It takes a little bit of extra steps, making sure that everything matches. But I think if people knew that bring their card is very powerful because it's the most updated.
I couldn't agree more, and let me tell you.
And some driver's licenses are old, Because you can vote with the driver's license even though it's up to 3 years.
Let me make a comment about that. And so this is one, if you ever looked at our voter the form, the voter registration card, whatever, I can't remember.
Certificate.
It is a state form. And it is incredibly antiquated in that it's, if you look at the design, it's got a bunch of boxes. You know what that's from? That's from the days when voter registration was done completely on paper. And they go into the system and they look up the registration and they write, he's in this district, he's in this district, he's in this. That's how old that design is.
You don't need that now.
And so what that design should be is not a card this big, but a wallet-sized card that fits in your wallet. It has everything printed in a more reasonable fashion. And I've designed those in other states.
Even passports have wallet cards.
Exactly. And so we started to look at doing that here, and then, you know, like everything else, it was just like over mail stuff, it was, oh, Mike, you can't do that, that's a state form, you gotta get state permission to do that. So it's on our list, I don't think it's listed in here, but it's on mine. And so it's, hopefully we can influence this, get state's permission to change that. Next item.
That was one of the elections judges this time, and it would take us extra minutes, extra time to put the puzzle together. Okay, this is your driver's license, and this address, it's no longer your home address. This is, you really, so it added more minutes to the voting process.
Taking longer and longer for people to get updated driver's license.
Okay, what's,
Yeah, sure.
and that will probably reduce the amount of errors. Some of our, you know, sometimes like, okay, I know you are a registered voter, and I guess we need to add you with your new address, and again, that would probably reduce the number of errors as well.
Thank you for that comment. Anything else? Want to move on to the complaint summary? Okay. So look at the screen. So a complaint is defined as an expression of dissatisfaction. So it's not, oh, my machine's not working. This is a complaint about a person or a procedure or us, whatever it might be. Logged during the November 22 general election, there were 219 complaints that were identified. 35 of those complaints were unactionable. You know, they were outside of our control. You know, and there's a few examples. Disruptive electioneering outside the 100-foot distance marker. There's nothing I can do about that. It's just outside of my control. That's
It's outside the election judge's control.
exactly. The list of declared write-in candidates does not provide a candidate's party affiliation. So they wanted, you know, that we had to put, here's official write-in candidates. Who's a Democrat, who's a Republican? Why didn't you put that there, right? You can't. Because by state law. So that's a complaint, but it's not a valid. The complaint is to the legislature, not to me. An unregistered, and by the way, I don't think that's a valid complaint anyway, because parties nominate their people, they put them on the ballots.
In Texas,
Those,
in Texas, you can't.
yeah, if you're
There's no way
writing,
of-
if you're writing
Writing.
by default, you're writing, member of party for that purpose. An unregistered voter does not have the option to vote on a standard ballot. You know, I mean, complaining about,
That's a complaint.
yeah, I mean, so those are the types of, you know, we get those complaints, and so there was 35 of those that, yeah, thanks for your comment, but no. 184 complaints were actionable, and the top priorities, you know, like poll worker conduct. That's a big one. You know, rude or otherwise inappropriate conduct from a poll worker that was reported 32 times.
In defense of election judges, you know, if you're assertive in doing your job, that might be interpreted as being,
Exactly.
being rude or uncooperative.
It's actionable, but doesn't necessarily mean it's valid, you know, so we something we look into, we get both sides of the story, you know, that's.
Because if you come in and you were issued a ballot by mail and you don't have it with you, you can either vote a provisional ballot or go home and get it. Somebody might interpret that
Yeah.
as an uncooperative judge.
Yeah, Petra's got a comment, she was helping themselves.
That also includes poll workers telling on other poll workers. So there's, yeah, poll worker and voter drama and poll worker drama.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
11 presiding judges were still not on their site by 6:30 a.m. That's going to go on the report card. And then that caused at least 3 sites to open late. Some vote centers were not ADA compliant, and of course we know that. 12 vote centers were reported for being unresponsive to calls from curbside voters. That's and then some of those same judges, they don't pick, we call them, they don't pick up their phone. And so we call, then we call their private phones, and they don't pick that up. You know, so, and then we call one of their poll workers, and the clerks, and say, can you get your judge to answer the phone? So we do everything we can, but those are very valid complaints. During peak hours, there was a delay in downloading equal vote transactions from the central server. We talked about that already. Valid complaint. Overstaffing of poll workers was reported 45 times. Most of those, frankly, were invalid. What happened in most of those cases, we said, Bonnie knows this, she's smiling back there. Poll worker, judge, send us your list of clerks. Judge, give us your list of clerks. Judge, give us your list of clerks. Multiple times. Never sent a list. Well, apparently this judge doesn't have any clerks. We better assign him some clerks. We assign 5 clerks to that location, and then the judge shows up with his 5 clerks that he recruited. There's too many clerks. Oh, you guys why did you send clerks? Well, because you didn't tell us you had them. So we're just doing our jobs. And so that's what most of it is. We've got to get some of our judges. Most of our judges are fantastic. We got a small percentage of them that are just a little off. County issued cell phone did not have voicemail box set up. That's on us. I don't think we paid voicemail. I don't think that's not actually valid. These are just samples.
On that point we just talked about, it is that, again, in defense of election judges, if our judges can be given an opportunity to say that I will not require any assistance or support for staffing from the elections department. Because, many of our judges have a tradition of hiring all of their judges.
Absolutely, and we just need them to tell us. And we're just asking them to let us know if you got people, so, because if you don't, we'll get them. Right, so it's communications issue, so we got to get some of our judges out of some bad habits. That's
because we've set up a win-lose paradigm there that we shouldn't be pursuing.
Yeah. So that was just an example. The county issued equipment pressing against the interior of the ESC door prevented the ESC from opening. That's a really valid one. And it's one that we tried to correct. So that's a problem with our staff not following their checklist. Because it's on the checklist. But so that's just kind of an example of complaints. And so the question now becomes, why aren't I missing? Historically, there was a CEAC complaint committee that reviewed complaints received from polling places. So this is the complaint book from 2019, May 4th, 2019. So it's just this list of all the paper complaints that people filled out at the polling places. And I think historically, correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't here, you guys would review these, the subcommittee would review these and say, there's a really bad judge, we gotta get rid of it. And they would make a recommendation to commissioners where these 2 judges don't hire again.
So you would talk to the judge, all the judges? You would talk to the judges?
Oh, no, we didn't do any investigation beyond the complaint. We saw multiple complaints against a particular judge. It was the facts were relatively egregious.
But at the end point, it's the commissioners that decide. If
I'm not aware of any.
Did one of those one time, and there was a constant, many years of one particular judge. And that was just not her thing, it shouldn't have been, it's repeated, but the commissioners would not act on it. So that, I mean, we can only do what we can do.
Right. So historically, that's how it was. And so what we've done right now is we've taken all those complaints from paper complaints, all of our complaints from emails, all of our complaints from our phone calls, et cetera, put them all in one location, one electronic location, not paper. And we can provide that to you. But the question is that a role that you guys want to assume? Because what we're trying to do, and here's what I think would be really helpful in my opinion. What we're trying to do is to take all this information, complaints, direct information, right? But then there's indirect information, indirect evidence, circumstantial evidence, that did the place open on time? Did they fill out their checklist? Did they do, we've got this whole list of things where we grade them. When the inspector comes by, they have a checklist. They grade that person. Putting all those kind of that evidence together and to come up with an objective grade. So it's not just, this guy did this one bad thing. No, this guy didn't do A, B, C, and D. And typically, that's what you're going to see. There's going to be some people with gaps. And so, but putting that grading system together is difficult because someone didn't pass out I voted stickers. Yeah, that's an infraction. But that's a little bit different than they didn't show up till 8 o'clock. That's something, so there's a wait.
Or someone told 10 voters you can't vote for that.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
big deal.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think what would be really helpful is to have you guys tell us what's important, to help us with that grading and the weighting, and then to have that more objective criteria that it's much more powerful to send that to commissioners or to send to the parties first, because parties want to know.
I was actually going to ask you. I agree with us having a group to do this, but I don't agree with the next step being recommending review. I think there needs to be some other steps, which we can decide on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And one would be to send this parties review.
But consider that I'm not aware of a single election judge ever being fired through this process. How good, bad, or indifferent they were. Because it's circle the wagons, the parties defend, that judge, and then it dies at commissioner's court.
I think what you'll find, at least with the current party leadership, as I've talked to them, they don't want bad judges either.
I agree, 100%.
Because bad judges are pain for them. So I think that if we have a really objective, true grading system that helps them evaluate people, I think that would be very helpful. So that's my recommendation, but this is your committee. You guys are you're giving me recommendations to me.
What does that look like? Advisory or some other grading system? Simply, here's our grading system with respect to these judges, and no advisory and suggestions. What is that?
Before you ask that question, can I ask a question about you? So, because this is my question. I understand that we are advising the commission for, but, and maybe I'm wrong, it's my understanding though that the parties are nominating judges. Is that correct?
Correct.
So why wouldn't we advise the parties before we advise the commission?
I think that's logical. I think that having the endorsement of CEAC, that commissioners know that CEAC has looked at this grading system and they weighed in on it too. I think that makes it even more powerful too. And so, let's not look at this all negative too. There's some fantastic judges that are going to get A's. So we want to recognize those people too. So it's you create that sense of competition where people want to get better because they know they're being graded. So it helps all around. So I don't want to just have a negative spin. We're looking to fire people. We're just looking to improve the system overall.
I think it's a matter of, is there a pattern of the same behavior?
Yeah.
And maybe that just needs to be addressed in training. Say, we've seen this in a lot of things, so might not have applied to you or you, but there's a lot of other people that have done this particular thing and just pointing it out to them.
Right.
You know.
I 100% agree with you, Bonnie, because I know some seasoned judges who I had to advise them to go to the full training. Things change a lot every time. I think that as a clerk, it's okay to go to the short training, but I really believe a judge should attend full training.
Right.
I really feel something like that.
As an institution, we don't do much or anything with positive recognition of election judges. It's a burdensome job emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
And perhaps we need to think, get a letter from the election administrator or something after an election. Thank you for your
They do that.
service. That's never happened.
They
Something
do,
simple as
I've
that.
had one every time.
Huh?
He does that. He says, I got a certificate, got a button, I got a thank you. I did.
Must be on the naughty list.
Exactly.
You get it for the naughty list?
Let me just say one thing in terms of the question. It is something that I have reviewed these, I have looked at these complaints. My vote was for some of these, only 2 or 3 judges, but maybe 1 or 2, maybe 1 that I supported. And it was the egregious action.
It was
of what this, and what you had mentioned earlier, in terms of the denial, repeated denial based on
Allowing
something
people
that was
not to vote.
clearly violative of what, this voting is consistent with the pattern. In terms of an advisory, I mean, there's some people who should not be judged, and not a lot of them. It wasn't like we were suggesting that all these judges should be strict.
Right.
So I love the idea of a report card. So, who's doing what, I totally agree with the positive reinforcement of the judges. There are some folks where I think it's incumbent upon either this committee in terms of advisory elections department, and the elections department themselves, to let the commissioners court know that this person shouldn't be a judge based on continuous violations.
Right.
Of, constitutional right to vote.
Like more than one election doing the
Yes.
same thing.
And that's what we saw. It was a repeated, because these people who were complaining, this has been happening for years, as I recall, the complaint. So just in terms of the process, I'd love to know a little bit more about what you anticipate the process being in terms of kind of the reports you get from the commissioners.
Right.
Doing is there be any advisory behind it with egregious situations?
So I couldn't agree more. I think the question for you guys is, do you want to set up a subcommittee today so that we can meet with them, talk through the
Why don't we take it for a vote? Yeah.
You
Somebody,
make a motion?
you make a motion, and we'll support it.
Okay.
Let's make the motion and then we'll do,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you have a
we'll talk
question?
about it.
Okay. No.
Hold on one second,
Yeah.
Greg.
I, Renata de los Santos, move that we establish a subcommittee to hear complaints.
Second.
Nana's seconded it. Discussion. Yes, Camila.
I guess I just want to be careful with like creating ad hoc committees for various things. That's my hesitation, and I think that's the we create a new committee. Maybe, and I'm newer to the CEAC group, so maybe it's fine. And this has existed historically, from my understanding. But I'm wondering if it can align to at least the tactical plan, like if the complaints can be bucketed against the tactical plan, doing so much work there. Is there like any alignment opportunity there?
Well, I think that that's part of what the subcommittee would be doing, talking through those issues. What is the approach? How does it want to operate? How does it want to help weigh in, weighting these different, classifying these infractions, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot to discuss. I don't have those answers off the top of my head.
Be careful with using a weapon, because all organizations that rely on a lot of volunteers, there should be a sign that says volunteers are fragile, handle with care.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to weaponize it.
That's one of the reasons I would think there should be a positive aspect. It's not just some punishing, where it's not a witch hunt.
The discussion, yes, Alan.
He provides great feedback, because the judge might not realize that this is happening, and there's a track record. And this is not the first time. Just like teachers, we're always being visited in our classrooms, and we're provided with feedback. And now judges, they're being compensated now. Now you're being compensated to attend training, and So it's a way to give us a positive feedback.
I also too think we need to keep the full context. I'm sure judges are probably 2 or 3% of it. You know, it talks about broader issues, right? So I know we're talking about judges, but there are also other key things that I think that the benefit of this committee could help align to versus just looking for judges, right? I think also too, the committee has to be dedicated because that's a pretty thick book of complaints. How consistent are you gonna do it? How often are you gonna do it? What's the relevancy to that? And if we decide to do that, we've got to take all of those factors into play so that the elections department can act upon whatever that looks like.
Right.
Was I hearing Michael or other comments saying that perhaps instead of a complaint committee, subcommittee, that we should have perhaps a poll worker evaluation committee, so that way we can maybe rubber stamp a whole, these are excellent workers and these are ones we have to look at.
Broader.
That's a softer message.
So then I would be open to an amendment to the motion.
I'm gonna suggest we have a motion. So if you wanted to amend, if you wanted to amend your own motion, then you can do that. We're talking about the creation of a complaints subcommittee. If you wanted to amend that, then that would be acceptable. I think, at this point.
I would move that we change the name of the subcommittee from complaint to evaluation subcommittee.
Second.
Second. But we're still under same motion with amendment. Yes, Bob.
I have a
Still under
question
discussion.
about the training. If that's not pertinent to this motion, let me know. But I know last time that they said, if you're a judge, you can just take the advanced training, which is fewer hours. And so I don't think they went over a lot about the ID for checking in people. I know it, and I think I did it right, but some people might know that. If you don't pay attention to them, that's really important, like not accepting passports, really important. But if they never went to the training, or maybe that could be another thing stressed in the training.
You guys are looking for
Chair.
requirements.
Yeah, Chair, to Camilla's point, if we really want to do this, I think we should figure out first what the committee is for. Because I'm not even clear about that right now. So if we're going to create a committee right now, and we're not really sure what the committee charge is, if we really want to do that, we can maybe do it at a different time, but just let's kind of meet out with the chair, maybe the vice chair, maybe the secretary, what we're trying to do. What is the point in this new committee? And because I'm not getting it. I don't understand what we're voting on. We have one bad judge every 10 years and we're gonna have a committee. I don't get it. But if there's a reason to do, if it's to benefit the committee, the judges, if it's to punish the judges, if it's to grade the judges, if it's to grade the judges based on what the parties want. But to me, if we can have an amendment just to state parties, election judges are not the Supreme Court. We shouldn't be lifetime anyway. Every 4 or 5 years or 2 or 3 years, how about if the parties just renominate a judge? There's your report card. If you're good, you get renominated. If you're not, you're out. No legal nothing. No committees. We're out of there.
I can tell you if you.
Go ahead, Anna, I'll come to you.
No, go ahead.
I think this is an important committee. Once we vote and create the ad hoc committee, within us, we'll select a chair, make sure we look at all the information that you share with us, and provide a rationale. And again, this is to provide feedback. And it also lets our voters know that we are listening. Because why submit a complaint form if it's going nowhere? And this we're going to tell you, we're going to create a rubric. We will create a rubric. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for pattern. And our goal is to give positive feedback and an opportunity for growth. It's not a, I got you and you're in trouble. No, no, no. We want to keep our judges. They're critical and want to grow and the positive to provide a good customer service to our voters.
Lane, and then,
So what you said about, that we're knowing that they're listening, I see that as definitely a large part of the importance of this committee. And I like the amendment that you made, because if a person is taking the time to send an email about their experience because they want some improvement, or fill out the form about something because they want to improve the experience, if they're taking the time, I do think that we owe it to them to look at every single one of them and evaluate it and determine what we can do better possibly, or what the clerk could do better, or what the judge could do better, and, or what the party could do better. I do think that it's important for us to do that, and then make whatever, if needed, make whatever appropriate recommendation to the commission. I think that's very critical for our community, for our constituents.
To John's point, I'm a little unclear about something. So this report card, this grading system, it does exist currently or it does not exist?
That would be our,
We are working on gathering the evidence. We haven't put all the evidence together. And so that's what we're looking for help with, is kind of, how do we take all this information and analyze it?
That would be part of the mission of the committee.
correct, yes.
Chair, I'd like to call the question, and we can maybe just take this up for consideration at the next meeting. It's getting kind of late, so we're not going to resolve this, doesn't sound like.
So technically, we would need to vote on the amendment and then to actually vote on the motion.
Are you
That's
talking about
correct.
next, waiting until next quarter?
Yeah, I think we should. I actually think we should get through the vote now. And if there's no more real discussion,
Well, it could be a motion for table for that motion.
yeah. If we're
No,
fine,
my motion was to call the question.
and we are. So if you would please clarify, restate, or state your motion, Ray, so everyone can hear it. and we're
State,
gonna vote.
the amendment was to establish a evaluation committee for our poll workers. For our poll workers.
That's your amendment to.
That would be the amendment,
Okay, and what was your original?
to establish a complete
complaints.
subcommittee to evaluate the poll workers.
Okay. So we're going to take the vote. All those in favor of Ray's movement
Of the amendment.
of the amendment first, raise your hand. We the ayes have it. Madam Secretary, if you count the vote. Jones. All those opposed to the amendment? Two, the ayes have the amendment and the affirmative. Now the vote with respect to the original motion, which was,
But which would now be amended to say that we would have we would establish a subcommittee to
Oh, yeah.
evaluate the poll workers.
and all those in favor, raise your hand. Madam Secretary.
7. 7. Look, Dr. Levels, are you online? Can you hear us? He left the chat.
All those opposed, raise your hand.
About 7. Oh, sorry.
Two opposed. Okay, the motion carries. We will create, I believe it's incumbent upon the chair to create or to bring in the chairperson of this committee. And I will do that, not today, I don't believe I have to do it today, but I will entertain people who are interested in doing
Point
it.
four. Since our terms are expiring on the 31st, I think this might be incumbent on us whenever we get a new seated board.
It's possible. It's possible, but I'm going to go ahead and make a determination of who the chair should be so that we can have that with what we currently have and people readdress. So the motion carries. Anything else?
Possible volunteers who would like to volunteer to be on the
Absolutely. I'd love, that's what I was going to ask. If anybody has any wish to share this, then email me, or send it to Esmeralda and she can kind of put it out to anybody who wants to be on the committee. I'd love to know that as well. Okay? Anything further? Nothing from you, Michael?
I got one last slide, I'll go real fast, and that's late. So May 3rd joint election we have coming up. This is a contracted election between 30 potential entities and us. We enter into a contract. There's no county participation, so they're bearing the freight, they pay the whole cost of that election. The number of vote centers to be used in that election is undetermined at this point. The CEAC is meeting currently. They met last night, and they're going to meet January 25th and February 1st, and potentially beyond that. They're considering what they're going to be asked to consider at the next election or next meeting is whether or not they may want to move from a single model of number of vote centers to potentially a dual model. And I'll explain that a little bit further. Right now, we have this kind of competing interest where the cities are saying elections cost too much. What can you do to cut our costs, especially in small jurisdictions? And you need less polling places. You got a 10% or 9% turnout for a May election, and you got 450 polling places, and then you got a 64% turnout for a presidential election, and you got 450 polling places. And so so they want less, but then other people who want access want more. So it's this competing interest. One of the things I said to consider, because we believe we can do this legally, is to have a dual model where for a low, what would be classified as a projected low turnout election, 9% election, you could have a lesser number of polling places, perhaps 250, I don't know, just making up the number. And then for a large turnout election, you can have a projected 450. So you know, you're not splitting the baby, you're trying to satisfy both needs. And having some sort of dependability that there's always going to be 450, there's always going to be 250. And so people can rely on that. So that BCAC is going to consider that at the next meeting, whether or not they want to head down that path or the single model path. Then whatever path they choose, then it's going to be start to evaluate which locations they want to use. And then make that recommendation to Commissioner's Court. Commissioner's Court will ultimately decide which locations to use. The BCAC has expanded membership. It's not a formal committee like this one that's appointed by Commissioner's Court. It's one that was put together in 2019. We kept that same number of people on that committee, or the same people in the same organizations on that committee. And we quiz Commissioner's Court, is there anyone else you'd like to see on it? We got some feedback where we expanded with some more organizations. And so we've also, one of those organizations is SMU University, Methodist University, where they're going to participate and try to help us with some more evaluation tools. So bringing in a little more professional approach to picking those locations. As far as the May 3rd election, you know, there's new jurisdiction boundaries, new sub-regions, things I mentioned before, and I already mentioned the preliminary boundaries are done. We're going to review with an outside vendor to nail that down prior to the election, conducting the election, and then we're having to prepare for that election. We have our participating jurisdiction meeting on January 31st at 10 a.m. That's where all the city secretaries, et cetera, participate. We start to enter into negotiations on the contract, et cetera. That's all I had.
Any questions about this portion? If not, we're going to go ahead and go to, I'm sorry, Rick, go ahead.
I participated in the meeting yesterday, and I know we had a lot of discussion about the single model or the dual model plan and such. Is it feasible for us to get more information as to what other jurisdictions, other counties, and other areas might have done, what experience they've had with going dual model plan perhaps, and what type of implications that has had on voting? Because I know that some of the constituent people that I represent or talk with would be very concerned about implications on voting turnout and
and things like
I
that.
think that would be great information and we'll work to get that. And I know, we had done some preliminary numbers, last year in the May election. And our numbers were significantly higher than everyone else's. But what I don't know is how they flex up and down. It's, a set model or whether it's just a gut reaction, how let's have this make this. So we will do that research.
This time, we're going to go to general public comments. Anybody here or online that would have any general public comment? We hear anybody on the online? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. So adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
They're gonna have a conversation with Michael because